Thanks. Please work. Yes. Okay, yeah, so Qtist developer, also North Road. So North Road is a consultancy. We specialise in open source geospatial development, mapping and spatial analysis. This is my stepping out of my comfort zone talk. You know, usually when I do a talk at one of these things, it's technical or it's about QGIS or something like that. I don't think I'm gonna have a single acronym today or a single kind of mention of a computer program. So I'm trying to do something a little bit different. Please bear with me. Hope it goes all right. Thank you. All right. I'm gonna start by moving back in time a bit. So our story today starts decades ago now. When I was freshly graduated from postgrad geomatic study at RMIT University. My first job that I got straight out of university was in the spatial world, working for Victoria Police in their State Intelligence Services Division within the Spatial Intelligence Unit. So it's a big mouthful, but basically what that meant was that we were kind of looking at state level problems. So anything that was like really wide scale, across the whole state. Or if it was like a really high priority issue, like bushfires over summer and stuff, then that kind of got lumped on us. And the other part of our duty as well was we made mapping tools that local intelligence analysts, so people basically working in the police stations locally, looking at local problems for their regional issues and such. So we made tools that would make it easier for them to use the police data and analyse the police data and such. Incidentally, my experiences at Victoria Police were what led me to using open source geo in the first place, but that's like a different story. I'm not going to talk about that today. Okay, so got the job at Victoria Police. One condition of this job was that they had this thing called the Intelligence Practitioners Course, so the IPC. And the deal was you had 12 months to do this IPC training course or you'd lose your job. So you kind of got this grace period where you could get in, find your feet in the role, and then they'd throw you on this course, and if you didn't pass, you were out. This course had an infamous reputation that people would cry during. It was really demanding, and it was kind of just known for basically pushing people to their extremes, in what it was trying to get out of them. The thing about this course though, I did it, I gritted my teeth, got through to the end of it, and it really made me rethink the reports and the products that I was making at Victoria Police. So if you remember, I kind of went into that role straight out of uni. I was fresh out of uni. I was like full of confidence. I was, yay, spatial, everybody loves spatial, everybody loves maps. And I kind of thought that the products that I was making were like really high quality, good work, lots of nice data, lots of great data analysis, and that people would love them. But at the end of that course, I came away with that conclusion that what I was delivering wasn't actually what the operatives were needing. So I was giving reports that were full of data and information, but what they actually wanted was actionable intelligence. That's a bit of a buzzwordy phrase, so I'm going to explore what that actually means now. Okay, this was a concept that they kept coming back to as part of this intelligence practitioners course, and all throughout Victoria Police. So they had this thing called the intelligence pyramid. Looks like this. So at the bottom level, you've got data, so that's your raw numbers, that's the starting point of all your analysis. You build up on that, you do the analysis, the statistics, and you derive information from that data. And the goal, though, is to actually produce intelligence. Sorry, intelligence, yeah. Sometimes you'll see this pyramid in different forms and people put wisdom up the top there instead of intelligence. Basically the same thing, just a different word for it. But they're just keywords still anyway, so let's have a look at some examples to actually give these words some meaning. Let's look at the data level first off. Okay, we might have this phrase here. There were 596 residential burglaries in Brimbank during March. That's data. At the information level, we'd have a phrase like this. 82% of the burglaries which occurred in Brimbank during March occurred between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And then up at the intelligence level, a phrase like this. Offenders are targeting residential properties during work hours while the occupants are absent. Okay, here's my next example. At the data level, we've got this phrase. There were 120 residential burglaries in Brimbank during February and 146 during March. Taking this same piece of information up to the information step. We might have this. While residential burglaries offences in Brimbank increased by 22% from February to March, this is not a statistically significant increase and is in line with the monthly variances encountered within this region. Or maybe you've done your analysis and you've actually come to this kind of conclusion, is that the increase in residential burglary offences during March represents a statistically significant step change in offences within the region. This pattern does not match monthly trends observed in previous years. All right, let's go right up to the top. This is what they wanted. Repeat offender such and such was released from prison on February 25th, has a history of offending in Brimbank and prior charges for residential burglary and is likely responsible for the increase in offences observed during March. Following so far? Okay, here's my final example. Data level, we might have something like this, just a raw spreadsheet of theft of motor vehicle offences with the make and the model and the counts and such. The analyst has gone a little bit further, turned this information by graphing it, and we can see there's some relative kind of percentages there, breakdown. But up at the intelligence level, they've gone that step further and actually realised that the top thefts there were all luxury SUVs, and their report had this statement: offenders are targeting high-end luxury SUVs. Okay, still confused? Maybe? Nobody's crying yet, I think, so we're good. Okay, so let me rephrase all this again. I'm going to do it really lofty academic terms. The difference when you go from data at the bottom of that pyramid to information to intelligence at the top is an increasing capacity to generate action. Lofty academic terms. This is better referred to as like the so what factor. This is something they kept coming back to us for. It's like every time you put a report in, every sentence you write in your report, you apply so what to. So let's do that to our examples and we'll see what we get. There were 596 residential burglaries in Brimbank during March. So what? Does this number mean anything? Is this a good number? Is this a bad number? We don't know, it's a number. 82% of the burglaries which occurred in Brimbank during March occurred between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Okay, this is starting to get a bit better because we could use this and we could say, okay, well, we could do police patrols during this time, during these areas, during this time in that region. This is also known as basically prevent the offenders from offending in your region, push them into the neighbouring stats region so it mucks up their stats and we look good. But at that intelligence level, we've got this. Offenders are targeting residential properties during work hours while the occupants are absent, and this can kind of lead to a whole lot of actionable items from that because we've got better opportunity to target patrols. We could do inform the public, so this is called target hardening, where you might go and do a mail drop, you might go and do a door knock and say, hey, this is happening in the region, maybe consider locking your doors when you go out, getting better locks, etc. And maybe there's an opportunity there. They could do like a sting undercover operation as well if they know kind of where and when that's happening. Okay, let's look at our second example. There were 120 residential burglaries in Brimbank during February and 146 during March. So what? Does this mean anything? Is this like a normal yearly pattern? Like maybe every February to March there's a kind of increase going just as a seasonal pattern. Is it in line with what happened last year? Is it in line with just the normal kind of variances you see as numbers bounce up and down month to month? But I guess even more importantly, what can we do with this? Do we even need to do anything, or is this just business as usual? At our information level, this statement, the increase in residential burglaries during March represents a statistically significant step change in offences within the region, doesn't match previous trends. Okay, so this is telling us, the so what is that something has definitely changed. There's something to pay attention to here. But what? The only opportunity we get from this statement here is that we can do more analysis. We need more information. But right at the top level, if we can get to that bit of intelligence, that means we could do a targeted operation. They could start doing evidence gathering, like maybe they get a warrant for the cell phone records or something, and they've got stuff they can do from that. Okay, so that's our first takeaway. So data is just our starting point. We make it available if we need to, but we don't stop there. Why is this important? A couple of reasons for this. So first off, people are time poor, and that includes our audience. We're time poor, our audience are time poor. If we're just giving them data or information, then we're asking our audience to reinterpret that data for us. And we're also, in the process, basically requiring them to make their own conclusions. It goes a little bit deeper than that though. So as data scientists, as spatial analysts ourselves, we're the people who've been staring at this data. We've collated it, we've put it together, we've massaged it into shape, and we should know that data better than anybody else out there. So we would know the accuracy of that data, we'd know the limitations, we'd know any kind of assumptions that have been made as part of that data and are associated with it. But this casual reader who just picks up our data, they don't have that knowledge that we do of these constraints. And lastly, this analysis is actually our job. Theoretically, we're the people who are qualified to do it. We've trained in this, we've done it as a job, and we should be able to do it better than a manager, unless you're kind of in a really unusual situation where your manager actually is a data scientist. So this is takeaway number 2. This is actually our role. This is part of what we should be doing. So then the question is, why don't we generally do this? I'll say up front, it involves more work, but I don't think we don't do this because we're lazy. My experience over the last decade and a half of working with people who are spatial analysts is that we are always super excited by what we do, we're passionate about it, and we actually work super hard to make really good stuff. So it's not like we're deliberately taking shortcuts because we just want to get a job done and move on and be lazy or whatever. So one explanation I have is that, from my personal experiences at least, there was that miscommunication between what management actually wanted and their expectations and what I kind of thought was their expectations and their needs. This can actually go both ways though. Sometimes we get limited by micromanagement, and we might have a manager who specifically asks us to give them the raw data, and sometimes we even get chastised if we go further and start stepping beyond that and giving them information and intelligence from that. Those two are really tricky things. It's a tricky one to talk about. This one here also tricky to talk about. And it really cuts me up, to be honest, because imposter syndrome is, I would say, endemic to the spatial community, and we frequently doubt our own capabilities and believe that other people can do our job better than we can do it, and maybe they know the data better than we know that data.
Even you know?
Even me. Oh, 100%. I sit in the back of talks here sometimes and I'm I have no idea. This person is so far ahead of me on this topic, and I think everybody here can relate to that. I think when you get this situation of imposter syndrome, giving people just data is a logical choice. It's a way that we cover ourselves. If we just give them the data, they can't argue with that. We're not giving them an incorrect product, and if they draw a bad conclusion, then that's not kind of our fault. That's not our responsibility. It actually is a logical choice in that scenario. So they're the two really tricky ones. Micromanagement, imposter syndrome. I don't have answers for them, to be honest. That's talks in themselves, maybe next year. Hopefully not Phospher-G 2044 talks. One last cause that we can always be aware of for ourselves is the trap of getting caught up in the technology and forgetting about the story that technology is supposed to be telling. So I refer to this as the story map syndrome. So story map syndrome is when we go overboard delivering a fancy product which lets readers maybe interactively explore data and analyse that data when the actual important message would be better served by like just a single static graphic, or maybe even just a sentence of text instead of this kind of fancy interactive tech-heavy thing. So we get distracted by that technology and we forget entirely about the story and the message we're supposed to be giving. For me, like a really good example of this issue comes from these news articles that we often see where they basically just give us sort of like an interactive playground for data. You see a headline, looks really interesting, you want to find out what that headline is kind of teasing you about, you click on there and then it's this big interactive thing or some big kind of journey where they talk you through their analysis step by step and slowly build up that story. And I kind of think like, you know, I'm a spatial data guru, I'm a spatial data geek, like I love this kind of thing, but I hate those news articles, you know, I should be loving them, but I don't. And instead, I get to that situation where I'm just wanting the author to tell me their findings. Like, I just want the person who's done that research and knows that thing to tell me what I need to know. You know, I'm time poor. I don't really have the time to follow somebody else's analysis. Like, as interesting as great as it might be, I just want to know that so what factor from that story. And I think, to be honest, like this is like an increasingly important issue because for better or worse, like our audience and, you know, our readers' attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. That's not going to change. You know, that's not going to change in the next 5, 10 years. And honestly, like people are getting increasingly incapable of that objective data analysis. So if we're just giving them a news article or a report that's got the data, we're leading them down this trap that they'll get the wrong conclusion. Anyway, speaking of short attention spans, I need to get on to my next topic, which is how does this apply to maps? I've been talking about just numbers and crime and crap up till now. Let's talk about maps. Okay, frequently spatial data analysis stops at the data or information stages. So what do I mean by that? Let's have a look at some of these concepts from a purely spatial perspective. Okay, at the data level, we might get something like this. I would say this map is a typical example of data in a spatial context, just a map of raw point locations. Here you can see it right there, good. Let's kind of pretend these are residential burglaries. So there's no kind of analysis in this map at all. The findings are left entirely up to the audience, the reader, the viewer to formulate. And you're already sitting there, you know, you're sitting there in that seat looking at this map and you're starting to analyse this map here and start to draw your own conclusions. But you don't understand this data like I do. You know, these kind of normal offending patterns, they're unusual clusters that we should be looking at and paying attention to. Or maybe the things that look like clusters are just there because the rest of that map is not residential areas and they're industrial areas or commercial areas. Or, you know, maybe this is a housing estate that's only been partially built and all those red dots are the constructed houses and that's why they've been targeted. There's a massive so what factor here. Like, you know, what's happening here? What does it mean? What's it showing us? What can we do with this? Don't know. Here would be an even more extreme example of the data level, a raw CSV of offences. So, you know, spatial data analysts ourselves, we love getting this. This is what we want. We want that raw data to do our stuff with, but we're the odd ones out. We're the exceptions. So let's go up to the information level. We might get something like this. Yes, good, we see it all right. The same map, but we show here the offence hotspots. So we're seeing the kind of abnormal clusters of events. We're not just showing the raw data anymore, we're showing the results of some statistical analysis that's gone into it. This is valuable and it does give us some of those actionable options, but we could do better and we could have something like this. So this is what I learnt, that the police consider intelligence level spatial analysis. So it immediately gives us those key findings, it can't possibly be misinterpreted, and it gives an immediate, direct, actionable options. This would be another thing that I would call like intelligence level finding, just to kind of show that the spatial intelligence product could take many forms. So here, this analyst has done a bunch of work and they've used these findings to generate a specific list of high-risk properties. So this is actionable again. You could do a letter drop, you could do a door knock. and do that kind of target hardening. What about non-crime related examples? Let's have a look at a different type of map. At the data level, we could have something like this. So we're just showing features on a map. If we do this, we're requiring the map reader to interpret and analyse this data. So again, a reader could pick this up and think, so what? And if we go back to you guys out there, you're looking at this and you're already trying to understand what this map's telling us, but we don't know if it's something good or bad. Like, is it good if a purple line crosses a green line? Is it good if it crosses a yellow bit? What about that bit down in the bottom corner? Is anything happening there that we need to be aware of? So you're drawing these conclusions instantly, but maybe they're not correct. If we rework this map at what I would say is the kind of intelligence level, we might get something like this. We clearly highlight what the problem is, and it's immediately obvious this can't be misinterpreted. There's a bad thing happening there. Now, so what's really clear? Like, the current project area is unsuitable for development because it impinges on protected species overlays and will need to be revised. You convinced yet? What's next? This is my final kind of takeaway. This only really happens when you practice it. It's a thing that you need to build up confidence in. You need to build up that, the self-confidence. And the only way we can kind of get there and have that confidence in our own findings and interpretation of data is to practice it, try it out. Just like a musical instrument, just like any other kind of skill, it doesn't happen by itself. So I would encourage everybody just to give it a go. Worst comes to worst, you send it off to your manager and they're like, you didn't need to do all this, cross it out, just give me the spreadsheet. I've got one last thought. So what does this concept, what does what I've been talking about mean for data dashboards? Possibly the whole concept of a dashboard is inherently flawed because it takes the responsibility away from a trained analyst proactively monitoring data and informing management when action's required, and places it instead on time-poor, upper-level management staff who have competing priorities and lack the capacity to perform analysis on raw data in a timely manner. And then we get this kind of situation. Thanks, guys. That's the end of my talk.
Thanks, Nyall. I don't see anybody crying during his presentation, so that's good. Any questions for Nyall?
Maybe not so much a question as an observation, but I think maybe the reason we're hesitant to just offer a conclusion is that we do think about those limitations and those caveats and those assumptions, and you get bogged down in thinking about that, and you're like, oh, well, you can't really talk about this conclusion if you don't understand that this can only be used and understood in that way, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's a good logical reason why you wouldn't do that, and that's why I guess a big asterisk with all this is make that data available. Make your data, make your findings available, but that's not the, that's not page one. That's not your initial paragraph. That's not the end of your work.
Always include disclaimers.
Hi, thank you for, it's really great talk. I guess it's also not sort of a question, but a sort of reflection on my side. Because previously, when I was helping other people to writing the method part of their paper, we usually have this area of a plot of where you did this research and some of the results. And I feel like I was a bit struggling. It's like, you gotta have the 3 basic element of maps, you've gotta have north arrow, you've gotta get a scale bar, and the legend, and then that's the data part of everything. And just through this presentation, I feel like, because this is something I always ask myself, is paper are so long, people hate reading them, and people hate going through everything, and they usually just read the abstract and jump to the conclusion, and then if anything needed, they might search for a couple of keywords. But actually that method part of those graphs is extremely useful if that can be storytelling.
Yeah, are you coming from an academic paper
I'm working in
perspective?
the industry right now, but I had a little bit paper experience this year, and that's what I felt at that time.
Yeah, I would say academic papers are a little bit different because there's a sort of preset formula you have to follow for those. Writing about the method and that before you have your conclusions and such is the tried, you know, that's the standard. You need to kind of follow that. I guess these aren't rules, you know. There's
But I guess it's
places where
also
things
the
are-
standard is like we need to question those standards. Like they were there following certain patterns, but maybe we can do it a better way.
Yeah, and I love that example of the North Arrow and that everybody puts on the map that doesn't always need to be there. You know? Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nyall, for your presentation.
Thank you.
We've run out of time, so give Nyall a big hand. Thank you.